Hi, today we're going to talk about suicide. Now, I've been helping a few people out recently with young people who are trying to commit suicide or thought of committing suicide, or young kids they think are heading down that road of suicidal intentions. So I thought I'd do a talk about it, and I've done some research behind what they've been reading up on, and I found the fatal flaw with parents trying to cope with someone who's suicidal, or children trying to cope with a parent who might be suicidal. A lot of the documentaries I've read talk about the deep pain which someone feels that they can't escape, and that's what's causing them to be suicidal. Well, first thing, these things are written by people who haven't been suicidal, so they wouldn't have a damn clue what they're talking about. So there is no deep pain for those who are suicidal, and they talk about most suicidal people are conflicted about their avenues. So they want to live if they can get rid of this so-called pain, and then at the same time they want to go because the pain is too great to bear. Well, they're incorrect with that too. Most suicidal people are, from my experience, are not in any form conflicted with an alternative. What they are is they've made a decision, a very calculated decision about how they're going to do it, in what circumstance they will do it, and they are usually quite at peace to go ahead and do it. They're not upset, they're not usually angry, they're not usually in despair of any sort at the time. Like, you do get people in despair commit suicide, like a boyfriend break up today and they go and kill themselves tonight. You do get those ones as well, but for those who are serious about suicide, usually have had some great time to think about it. So the first thing they will do is research it. So if you're a parent or a child and you think someone's suicidal, a good place to start is check what they're Googling on Google, and see if they're Googling up things like suicide, how to commit suicide, all that kind of stuff. It's a process I went through. I didn't talk to anyone about my issues. Everybody knew my issues. It was in the public arena. It was in all the media. So there wasn't any secret to my issues. I wasn't in any great pain. Like, I wasn't suffering. I didn't have a hole in my leg or a hole in my back or anything like that. I didn't have broken bones. It's a load of rubbish being in pain. It's not pain. It's absolute just, you're sick and tired of the constant rubbish. Like, either it be fighting with family, or it'll be the money issues, or it'll be the stress of work, or the stress of family, or the stress of a child, or the stress of bullying in school. It's just the constant pressure of rubbish that is applied to somebody, to the point where you go, well, easier way out of this is just not be here. Like, if life is going to be like this, then why the hell be here? There's a better life after life. So, geez, I'm all keen to go. So you start Googling on how to commit suicide and avenues in which have worked. And the way you find the avenues which have worked is you look up suicides that have happened and see how they done it. So, you'll have people jumping off bridges, off buildings, off cliffs. You don't hear too many suicides from slashing their wrists, or over medicating and stuff like that. It does occur, but it's not high up on those charts, because the sleeping tablets, honestly, unless the environment's right, don't work. You take too many, it just gives you night terrors. Hanging sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. If you don't have enough force applied, you'll just choke to death, and it's a very slow and gruesome way to go, if it works at all. There's a lot more to hanging yourself than just putting a rope around a beam and hanging off it. It doesn't work like that. So a lot of people who try suicide wind up in places, in a hospital, where they've got brain damage from lack of oxygen to the brain, or injury so severe they will never ever recover from that, and that's where they'll live out their days in a hospital, being fed spoon-fed by a third party because of the injuries caused by their attempted suicide. So if you're contemplating suicide, my best advice to you would be to start something that they call speed writing. It's where for 1 minute you write as fast as you can and you don't stop. Even if you run out of things to write, you write something, anything. Write down, I don't know what to write a million times. It doesn't matter what you write. You do it fast, and you do it for 60 seconds, and you do it every day. And over the next few months, you will start to get little appearances of sentences that you didn't plan to write. And that's from deep inside your own brain, and it's telling you the secrets that you're not aware that you've got. A lot of our traumatic experiences, our brain has a tendency to squash and bury and don't talk about ever again. So, because it's too painful, so it buries it, and then that helps you get through life. But the little traits of energy that are left over from those bad experiences manifest, and they can lead to problems in your current life. So it's good to crack open that egg and find out what those little spirits are that are in your brain that are causing you to go down these roads. In my case, it was just the constant pressure. It wasn't pain. I wasn't upset when I was going to commit suicide. I basically woke up and said, that's about it. I think I'm done. I've lived a life here, and it's time for me to move on. Because I don't want to live a life of shit. Why should I? Because some company wants to trash you through your job. Why would you want to live a life of shit? Divorce and child custody and all these other things that also add up. It's just ridiculous, and the government has no interest in care for the citizens of any country when it comes to child support, because those guys are just ruthless, two-faced, rubbish people. The people that work in child support, I have absolutely no respect for. I have no idea why they would want to work in that environment, because it surely can't be healthy for them either, copping abusive calls all day. But they're copping abusive calls all day because they're idiots, and the way they talk and the way they treat people is just, it's unlawful what they do. And suicides from single parents, whether it be a mother or a father, that solely rests on the shoulders of those in the child support system who talk the way they do to people, because I've dealt with them personally, and I tell you what, they made threats after threats after threats, and those sort of things add to deaths. And when you die from a child support case, it just says case closed. It's no longer a child support case, so they just close the case and move it on. But the people who are in child support making those phone calls, they're responsible for those deaths, every single one of them. And I think if someone dies through the child support system, I think child support should be charged for murder. I think it's no less than that. It's not an accidental thing. They have a very strict driven protocol of aggression, and they drive people to commit suicide because they just rape and pillage the other person until they can't survive. So if they can't survive, of course they're not going to see any future of life. So for child support, I think the people making those calls ought to be charged for murder for a death in child support, because they're the ones who inflicted it. In my case, it was ISS Security, and for what they done and the cover up and protection they got from the AFP, because they made a deal about a $10,000 contract in Canberra, and I was going to get charged for offensive language, the term Australian Federal Police. So you can, after many years of fighting this, and I fought it through the AFP and cleared my name, and then even after that, the AFP failed to support their employee and allowed ISS to continue their rubbish. And then, of course, well, I'm not going to let that ride, so I'm not going to be part of a cover-up deal. So I went and did it my way, and that had its own repercussions as well. It caused depression, arguments, loss of income, more pressure. So by the end of it, and after fighting for so long, you get to a point where any escape is a good escape. So that's when I started researching about escaping the pressures, and my escape, of course, led you down the road of suicide. So when parents are looking to research suicide, don't believe what you're reading by the psychologists and psychiatrists on the internet, because they have no idea. they seriously have absolutely no idea what's entailed. That the talk of being in two minds is just ridiculous. You're not. You're in a single mind. In fact, when I went to do mine, I was quite peaceful. I was quite content, and I was quite happy with what I was doing. And I'd come to that realization and that conclusion. If you ask me now, would if I relived it, would I have come back over? No, probably not. Probably not. I still have thoughts even till today. That was the best choice of action, and had I gone, it would have been better for me. Because now I've got to work every day, struggle every day, deal with relationships every day. It's just rubbish what the world puts on you, and normally it's not anything you're particularly doing. It's just life. You get your ups, you get your downs, and it's for some people and it's not for others. And for me, personally, I won't really care. If I lived or died tomorrow, I don't care. I'm past that now. So I enjoy life now, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm having, mostly a good time. I still get the usual stresses of business and work and taxes and bills and all that kind of stuff. But, on a kosher day, I'm okay with it. But once you attempt a suicide, that thought never ever goes far from your mind, because you still rationalise with what you were doing. You still understand what you were doing, and you still believe it was the best decision you should have made. But actually going through with it is not an easy task either. A lot of people go, well, they're taking the easy way out, the chicken's way out. Well, all I can say to those people is, unless you've ever tried to take your own life, you need to zip that mouth shut, because it is nothing easy about it. For someone to drive a 30-inch knife straight through their wrist and out the other side, that is not an easy task, I can assure you, and it takes a lot to get there. So I don't believe it's an easy way out. It's quite a hard way out, to be honest, and it's not an enjoyable way out. But and it carries its own stress and its own being. But still, you rationalise yourself that this is best for me, and that's how it is. But for people trying to support people who are suicidal, the best thing I would suggest to you, because when you're suicidal, you get to that point, talking to someone isn't going to count, and these helplines are useless, seriously. Like people, attention grabbing suiciders, they're the ones, who will do scratches on themselves with a piece of glass and go, oh, I'm trying to commit suicide. They're just attention seekers, and they're the ones who will use the phone call the most. Real people suicide, and real people with real skills about wanting to suicide have no intention to pick a phone up and call someone. None whatsoever. Because we're not after attention. We don't give a stuff whether you miss us or you don't, really, to be honest, at the end of the day. And people go, oh, that's pretty selfish, but it's not really. Because it doesn't matter whether I did die or I didn't die on that day, because eventually I'm going to die. So if you're going to feel sad when I die, you're going to feel sad when I die. Then you're going to feel sad when I die. So it's not really relevant. They just go, oh, I wanted to help. Well, that is probably the most hypocritical statement that someone can say to someone. When you talk to me, I could have helped. Really? Well, how could you help? You're going to sit there and tell me things will be better in 10 years' time? Makes you think they will be. What if they're not? You can't make any judgment on what's going to be better, what's going to be worse. You can't help by solving the problem. You can't help by giving any advice that'll fix the problem. To be honest, the only way to help these situations is to find out the cause and remedy the cause. So if it's child support, then the only way to remedy that is get rid of child support. It's not going to help talking, saying, oh, you've still got to pay your obligation. Well, we don't need child support for that. It would be better for a family to sit down who's broken and negotiate what's good for the child, and I think people who receive child support should have receipts and have to declare what they receive and what they spend on that child, because I can tell you now, the child support I paid didn't all go into my daughter. I can tell you that right now. So, and then the government rationalises it by saying, oh yeah, but the mother's got to pay half the rent. So the child's got to pay half the rent for the mother. Are you kidding me? I've got to pay full rent without the child. So why would it matter if the mother's paying full rent? Or the father's paying full rent? It really doesn't matter. The child never pays rent. Not until they're at least got a job. What parent makes their child pay rent when they're not working? So how many of you out there have got kids in school right now paying rent? None of you, and then child support goes, well, your child's got to pay rent. No, he or she doesn't have to pay rent. They're the child. If the parent can't afford to look after the child, then give it to the other parent who can. It's not anything to do with that. And they're saying, well, that's because, one parent can afford to look after it and one parent can't. And therefore, we're basing it on finances. Well, having a child is based on finances. That's the whole clutch of it. If you're going to have a child, you must be able to financially bring up that child. And if you can't, don't have a child. So it's ridiculous what people do and what people say to manipulate systems. And I can tell you, I had some allegations thrown at me right field, ones I never saw coming, and it was just ridiculous. But getting back to the basis of the suicide stuff, I would suggest for parents or children dealing with someone or friends dealing with someone with suicide, look, if you know they're contemplating suicide, you can do something about it. You can sit them down and go, listen, I know what you're doing, I know where you're planning, but can I at least put an offer to you before you to walk down that road? Try something. Get them to try speed writing and let them and tell them, give it 2 months, just 2 months. You write in a book, you keep it to yourself. At the end of that 2 months, go back and read what you wrote and see what's in there that you didn't know you wrote. And little things will start popping up. The longer they do it, the better it gets and the more you see. So that's what mainly helped me through mine. But, for mine, it wound up on social media, on YouTube, which made me then known to the world that that's what had happened. And then from there, it went to ABC Radio on 2 different channels. And then from there, it went to the Weekend Australia Day publication. And so now I push for people who are going through these depressional stages, and to take a chance, and sometimes even a stranger. If a stranger offers to talk to you, then talk to them, and put your words down. Everyone says, oh, you need to talk to these trained psychologists and psychiatrists about suicide intentions. To me personally, I think that's a load of crock. I've dealt with many of these psychiatrists and psychologists, and they are the most backwards thinking, ridiculous minded people I've ever come across. The stuff they tell you and the stuff they put to you is just ridiculous. You'll get psychiatrists who will yell at a person and try to make them believe that they're just acting, and all of a sudden they're going to go, oh, it's finished, I'm cured. Oh, you're a miracle worker. That might work for someone who is like 80% of them who are, trying to act their way into some sort of environment. But for those who are serious, that'll do nothing except enforce the fact of what they're intending to do. So psychiatrists and psychologists can actually enforce the fact that your child's going to commit suicide by the way they treat them, And when they sit there and they tell them to do, to speak about what it is that's troubling them, the hardest thing to ask someone who's suicidal, at least, is, why are you trying to commit suicide? Well, it's easy. You want it to end. Whatever the issues are, you want to finish it. You're done. You're finished. You've had enough. There's no more. You just want out. So you don't need to ask that question. The person who you're asking isn't going to be able to tell you anyway, because it's not ever just one tiny little thing. It'll be amplified by many things. It'll be amplified, and the minute you start thinking suicidal, there's a perception change. So if you perceive a positive thing and someone comes to you and says something, you can receive it positively. You can use those same words to a negative person and they will be offended by what you've said, because of the perceptive mind of being negative or being positive. If you're thinking negative, anything you do will be negative. Let's say you're talking about your partner having an affair. They're not having an affair, but because you're negative about the fact that they might be having an affair, goes to work at 6 o'clock, comes home at 7, normally home at 6:30. Or where have you been? Oh, I stopped and put fuel in the car, grabbed a bottle of milk, came home. Now, if you think they're having an affair, who are you seeing? Because you're negative thinking minded, you're automatically thinking there's something else going on, when in fact there's not anything going on. It's just the fact that they got stopped and got milk and they came home. They've got the milk in their hand. What makes you think they did anything else? But people will balloon that into their own belief because their negative thinking is allowing them to create the scenario. So the more you think about something, usually the less it really is. It's just you're thinking about it more. So that can cause to the depression and cause them to believe, and everything you do from then on, they will believe is a negative thing. It's not, you're not being innocent, you're lying to them, you're not giving them what they want to hear, you're not admitting to something you haven't done. So that they just build up the balloon of negativity, which will then, they will start to rationalize, well, how can I stop this? How can I get out of this? You know, I don't want to go through the divorce. I don't want to go through the stigma of being looked down upon because I got divorced. And then they will then, if they do go through it, they'll come out with it with such anger that they will disperse the story that they made up in their mind about the other party. Now, it won't take long before the people around them see the facts and start going, hang on, you said all this was happening. And then time tells, that the truth comes out. But it's sometimes like mine, it took, I don't know, 11 years. But the truth does come out. But for people who are suicidal and dealing with the suicide, you can't ask them to explain. You just can't. You just can't even really talk to them because they're not in the mindset, and they don't really understand themselves exactly why they're thinking the way they're thinking. And it's not because they are stupid, and it's not because they just have a crazy thought idea. In your body has this unique ability of survival. So the conflict is not about, oh, maybe there's a better life in 5 years' time. Maybe if I can find a way I can get out of this suicidal thing. That's not the conflict. The conflict is when you're trying to kill yourself, your body goes into the defense mode. It will try and save you. Regardless of what you want to do, your body will make it very, very hard for you to do it. So, and don't listen to everything on the internet about techniques of suicide. Now, I'm not going to go into techniques of suicide. I know the perfect techniques. However, I'm not going to go into them because I don't want someone watching this video and saying, well, he said this would work, and it would 100% work. But I would rather, if you're suicidal and watching this movie, this talking, that you start trying speed writing. And I know for a few weeks you're going to think I'm crazy and I'm not doing anything, but you push through it and you give it 2 months before you say anything else, and I will bet there's stuff in there you didn't even know you wrote. So that would be my first suggestion. Now, if it comes to legal issues, say you're fighting a court case, my best bet is for you to get an old law book and start reading it, and you will find more about your case than you can possibly imagine. And I can tell you that's what I did, and I won my case. In fact, I've won both my cases. So I had a child support case, and I had a gag order case with ISS Security, ISS World. So, and I won my cases, and that was by just getting some old stupid book from the dump that had law in it, and I read the laws, and then I would apply those laws to my letters. And even though I didn't state the laws, because I didn't want to come across like I'm some lawyer, I did manipulate the letters to read into those laws to allow me to do what I was doing. So, that's the best bit. If it's coming to child support and you're thinking of committing, suicide for child support, then my suggestion to you is pick up a pen, pick up an old cheap law book, and start asking a lot of questions. And you will be surprised at the answers you get. And believe me, they will give you the answers to be able to fix whatever the problem is with child support. if they're making threats to you and demands on you, you can actually complain about that. And you can complain to the state ombudsman straight up and put them up for bullying, harassment, victimisation. Like they tried with me by saying, "Oh, do you know we can value your income on your potential income?" And I returned to them and said, "I can't see a courthouse in Australia saying I have to go and serve my country overseas where people are being killed so that my ex-wife can get extra money." So, it's just ridiculous. All you do is challenge them. Say, yeah, find a court that'll grant you that. It's not going to happen. And you do have rights of appeal, and you can take it to court if it gets that far. And you can use legal aid to do that because it's a government agency putting pressures on you that they legally shouldn't be allowed to. They shouldn't be allowed to even contemplate the idea of saying, "Oh, you have the potential to earn, and that's what we're going to charge you on," because you're not earning it, but you have the potential. It's just ridiculous. So what do I just go down the bank and say, "Oh, listen, I want a home loan. I'm unemployed at the moment, but I've got the potential to earn, 150 to $1 million a year because, I can be anything I want to be in Australia." That's what everyone tells me. I can be a CEO of some corporation tomorrow if I wanted to be. But, so on that potential, can I buy like 10 homes? I've got no way of paying it back right now, but the potential's there that I could do that. So if you give me the 10 homes, then, technically I could sell 5 off and pay the other 5 out. But, you've got to give me the loan first. But, it's rubbish, for what child support does to people. So that's pretty much where I'll wrap it up for now. And if you have any legal avenues that are getting you so depressed that you're contemplating suicide, send me a message, send me an email. It's AFP, like AFP for Australian Federal Police, ATW for all the way, at gmail.com. You can send me an email or leave a comment below this feed and tell me, we'll talk in private about your situation, and I will give you the people to write to, the avenues to complain, and you can bring these organisations to their knees. For me, I brought child support. I went in for one meeting. They had 2 big burly boys there to protect the counsellor who was talking to me about for child support, and I told them to bugger off or we're going to have an issue, so they left. And then I spoke to the lady, and she basically, after our conversation, I won't tell you everything I told her, but after our conversation, I was polite about it. I left the building and I was halfway to my car, which was only 500 metres away, and or maybe 300 metres, wasn't that far anyway. It's across the road and through a car park. So by the time I'd got to my car, they rang me up and said, "We're going to cancel child support. Anything you paid for the past 3 months is being refunded to you, blah, blah, blah." And that was just through one conversation and saying the right words, because they had stolen $7,000 of mine to begin with. So why should I pay any more? You stole $7,000, gave it to the ex, and then you turn around and tell me now I've got to pay more. No way in the world. And there's methods to get around child support, like changing banks regularly. Working for yourself is always a good one. There are avenues and there's ways to do that. So if ever you get stuck and you want to talk about that, by all means, give me a call. Send me a message and I'll get back to you, and we'll give you a number and I'll have a chat to you and we'll sort something out for you, don't worry. It's not legal advice, but the tactics work, I know, because I've done them. So that's about all I've got to say for now, and we'll pick up on something else at a bit later date. Okay, thank you. Oh, please like and subscribe to my channel and share the hell out of this, because, people have got to be aware of what's going on and start dealing with people with suicide intentions and putting a stop to people dying for other people's problems, Yeah, so thank you.